hose and just dump it on there for once a week, they'll do okay. But yeah, so this presentation is called Local Roots. It's how native plants can shape a landscape. We'll dive into a little bit of the history of landscaping in general, where it came from, why people do it, humans' thoughts on it. We'll kind of touch base on some of the negative side effects of what we see a lot of in landscapes. And then we'll kind of jump into how to utilize natives in landscapes, and then how to get involved more in the area, specifically in the Sunriver area, if that's something that anyone's interested in doing, and learn a little bit more about what to do out here as far as growing plants and getting your house looking nice. So let's see. So the origins of landscaping. Right, so the idea of landscaping actually is fairly new. It kind of emerged in the 17th and 18th century. It's actually it came from the imagination of Italian painters. So Italian painters started making these beautiful landscapes, and what ended up happening is these folks in England saw these beautiful landscapes. They weren't based on anything in Italy. They were just beautiful landscapes that these painters were doing. And these folks in England saw this and they go, we want that. We need that. And at the time, these guys were making, they call them grand tours, right? And it was kind of like the pinnacle of a young man's education in England at the time. And they would go and take these tours of Europe, and they would go through Italy, and they would see these paintings, and they would come back and say, hey, I'm going to put in a lawn. I'm going to put in 6 rocks over here. I'm going to put in 2 trees over here, and I'm going to put in a fake lake over there. And it was a symbol of wealth. It was a symbol of high esteem. It was you had to have a whole bunch of people to take care of your property. Once you did that, it wasn't just natural, and it was manicured, and you needed people to take care of it. So this started the development of a lot of the gardens that you now see in England and Europe in general. You see these rolling lawns, artificial lakes, and classical architecture that we've all come familiar with as a traditional landscape. And that all started from some guy's imagination of just what they wanted to paint and what they thought was going to be real pretty. And they're not wrong. It is pretty in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, though, that has been embedded in our culture to do this, and this, to put this in, and this in. And there's not a ton of benefits to a lot of the traditional landscaping. And so we come from a mindset that you moved here for a reason. It's absolutely beautiful. You go on hikes and walks for a reason. You go to see the flora, the fauna, and you can recreate that in your yard. And a lot of it, Michael Pollan, author, if you guys aren't familiar with him, check him out. He's written a lot of books, Omnivore Dilemma, sorry. But one of the things that he's talked about is how we spend all this time to control. It's about control, right? We've got to this point in the development of our landscapes where a lot of it is about control. We don't like having anything that is kind of out of order, because we don't feel like we're in control of it. And so it's now really creeped into our kind of mindset of what things should look like, in terms of it being, symmetrical and everything being perfect and stuff. And that's not really how nature works. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Entropy is what most animals seek in nature. If you look at a little bush and you see hundreds of little birds in it, it's because of that entropy. It's because you're breaking up the sight lines, the predators can't see them as well. And so that's what we try to emulate when we create native landscapes. And so we're trying to balance that aspect of entropy and still having aesthetic value, something that kind of errs on the traditional side but isn't traditional. And so that leads us into the environmental impacts of traditional lawns. And this is, I always start with this one because so many people have lawns. I don't have an issue with lawns. I have an issue with lawns that don't get used, right? So I put a lawn in my backyard. I'm a purist when it comes to natives. I stick to natives, but I get the value of a lawn. If I run all over native plant species, particularly the grasses out here, they're bunch grasses. So if I try to kick a little ball over to my son, it's going to go, all over the place, and that's no fun. So if you're using a small patch of lawn and you're utilizing it, great. Why we have lawns in between our sidewalks and our curbs, that's just a lot of inputs, a lot of work, and no gain. Lawns provide, other than the fact that they suck in carbon dioxide and put out oxygen, there's no environmental purpose for lawns. They don't provide any food for any animals. They're not helpful for any pollinators. They really do nothing. So it's just a lot of maintenance. You put fertilizer on it so it grows, and then you mow it so it's shorter, and then it gets too tight, so then you have to aerate it, so then you put fertilizer on it so then it can grow and get tight again. So that it's just a very cyclical thing that doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it, but you know, when you snap that photo, it looks really nice.
If my wife were here, she would standing up to take out another lawn that I have.
Yeah, and
holding on tight to it.
There's definitely some aesthetic appeal to having a lawn that stays green all the time in the front. But again, this goes back to the mentality of what a garden and what a lawn should look like, and that is totally, like I said, yeah, especially over in Portland area. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, and yeah. So traditional lawns require substantial water. Kind of talked about that. They take more water than any other crop in the United States. That's just a lot of water. And here we talk about droughts, and Central Oregon in particular is in a major drought. It's one of the largest droughts in the country. It kind of goes under the radar because we do have a giant river going through our backyard. But as you travel east, it's pretty brutal out there. I know Madras in particular does a lot of agriculture. They're no longer getting water from that flow. All those canals that are going out there, they're not seeing the benefits of a lot of that. And so it's not even getting used for agriculture. It's getting used in the use it or lose it kind of program that we have. Obviously, there's some other bad impacts of lawns, including chemical runoff. All the fertilizers and pesticides that you put on them is horrible. All that stuff runs off because a lot of the sprinklers that go on lawns are advanced variable arc sprinklers. So the ones that just spray a ton of water all at one time, all that gets dumped on there, and most of it runs off. It's not getting absorbed into the soil. It's not like lawns have deep roots. It's very shallow. We've all seen sod at Home Depot. You know, it's that, and you dig it up 20 years later, it's that. It's the same. It's not really going down anywhere. And so all that fertilizer that you're putting on there sits on top. All that water takes it away, and so you're not really utilizing the water, and you're putting all that stuff into our waterways. Air pollution. This is kind of a number that I've always been like, wait, really? But gas powered lawn equipment has a huge effect on air pollution, and 5% is not a small amount, you know. And in my head, I'm like, a little lawnmower, really? But when every single house has one, there's not a time I drive by these golf courses they're not running some equipment, right? They're going constantly. So all that starts going up into the air. We start moving into the lithium stuff now, a lot of the battery operated things, but even those have impacts. You know, we still don't know, where do you recycle this lithium? What are you doing with it? You know, it gets mined, it gets refined, it gets shipped in between each of these processes. So there's still huge environmental impacts for a lawn. And so this gets down to the financial cost, and it's just a lot of money for what? And again, if you're using it, if you got your kiddos out there, your grandkids, your neighbors playing on it and having a good time, by all means. But there's so much lawn that we have and sod that's out there that is totally just for aesthetic value and doesn't really bring a lot to the table. And so this is where we start to look into embracing native plants in Central Oregon. Okay, so it's already really hard to grow stuff here. Native plants are extremely well suited for this environment, obviously. And when I talk about native plants, I don't just mean like, hey, we can't go, I see that, I see that, let's put those in. We use the whole Great Basin as a palette for native plant species. And so some things might not have ever been here, but everything has been grazed so heavily, especially in the state of Oregon, from tip to tail here. There's not been an area that hasn't been grazed. A lot of the OSU folks use the peninsula. It's not really they call it the island. It's actually a peninsula out on Lake Billy Chinook as a reference for what's native in this particular area. Even that little island peninsula has been grazed by goats for a short period of time in its history. So there's really been nothing that we can look at and say, hey, this is the exact palette of what should be out here, because everything's been touched by man. And so when we look at the broader Great Basin region, we're able to kind of incorporate a lot more species and see how they do out here and see what kind of fauna is attracted to that, and native fauna in particular. So that's what I mean when I talk about our native plant species. Obviously, there's going to be stuff down in like Arizona that probably was never up here just based on the climate. But as we start to see the climate shift, those plants are doing a lot better here, and we're starting to see them come on their own as volunteers. So like I said, native plants are a lot better suited for the high desert environment. They require less water and maintenance. And so I mean, if you're down, I put these numbers on here just before starting this because I think people are always a little bit surprised, especially if you're coming from the other side where your growing season is yes. The growing season out here is 50 to 70 days in Lapine, and then Bend is 80 to 100. So in Sunriver, you're looking at, you know, a little bit in between there, probably closer to the Lapine. So most of the plants you go down, if you're going to plant some vegetables or something like that, yeah, good luck. Your tomatoes are most likely going to be black in July because of some weird frost. So what's that?
Unless you have a greenhouse.
Exactly. If you have cold houses or greenhouses or something, you do a much there's a much better chance that they do okay. So I was out at the Rhubarb Festival last year selling native plants, mostly the trees from Project Ponderosa, and also a whole bunch of just native forbs, native flowers and stuff that we had. And I had them out there, and at the same time that this was going on, I was kind of getting frustrated. Sales weren't really where I wanted them to be, and I was kind of getting frustrated. And after the first day, a whole bunch more people came over, and they go, "Oh yeah, there's a whole plant sale up the road. Like it's their annual plant sale that's right up the road." I'm going, "Oh, well, of course, I'm the one booth out here selling plants, and it's during their plant sale." But they're growing all sorts of cultivars and GMO stuff and everything, and got, you know, all sorts of really cool plants if you're into that. And what ended up being my sales pitch after that was really doing nothing, and I did less, and that's what helped me get more. And it was, I didn't touch the plants overnight, and this was in June, and we had a snow, and so it got below freezing, and a lot of the plants at that sale up the street died if they didn't bring them indoors. And then it was a ton of work to bring them indoors. And so all these people came the next day when the sale was over, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what'd you do with your plants?" I said, "I went home. I got to see my family. I left them out here. They're fine." And people had no idea. They could not wrap their head around that the plants just stayed outside during a snowstorm and they were totally fine. And I go, "Yeah, they're native." And it opened up that door to a bunch of people that had no idea. I think people know about native plants, but they don't necessarily understand the benefits and how much easier it is to take care of them. And you don't have to baby them. And they do so much better out here because they're made for this. And so on top of them just being better suited for the environment out here, they provide essential habitat and food sources for native fauna, including pollinators and birds. So when we talk about this, a lot of times people go, "Well, you know, I planted these daffodils or these tulips and I saw bees on them." You go, "Yeah, you probably saw Italian honeybees on your plants, right? Because we got a garden over there with a whole bunch of Italian honeybees, and they're not really interested in a lot of the plants that we plant out here. They're not really interested in the native plants. They're going somewhere else. I don't know where they're going, but they're finding other people's properties, and that's where they're getting their pollen from, because I rarely see them on our plants up there. What I do see is the mason bees and a lot of our other native bees and plant species. And the reason for that is because the plants that are out here have evolved over a millennia to work specifically with these insects and these deer and other animals that are out here. And I always use the example of milkweed because that seems to be the hot topic of the last like 5 years. But it's so true. Is you have showy milkweed out here and linear leaf milkweed. It's two different varieties. And monarch butterfly larvae need this to, or the caterpillars need this to survive. This is what they eat. That's it. There's not another plant that they're going after. That's it. So they lay their eggs in them and give them that food for the first part of their life. If you don't have milkweed, you don't have monarch butterflies. And if you've ever seen a giant monarch butterfly cluster when they're migrating and stuff, it's super cool. I highly recommend finding that. And I went to school in UCSB, and on the bluffs of UCSB, they travel through there, you know, on their route from Mexico up north and stuff. And they fill up the canopies, and one or two of them will drop, and then the whole thing will drop, and there's just thousands of butterflies. I've never seen anything like that. It's really cool. And so you kind of get this idea of how special and unique nature is when you see events like that, and you go, all this starts from a couple species of, you know, milkweed. It's like crazy. So I get why people are pushing it really hard. But I love that example because it just goes to show exactly how interconnected our ecosystems are. So one of the other things that gets brought up, and I utilize this a whole bunch out here, is native plants help prevent erosion and maintain soil health. So most of the grasses that you see out here, the bunch grasses, are either sheep fescue or Idaho fescue, both native species. And the other one that I plant a whole bunch of out here is Sandberg's bluegrass. And I do that specifically because it's a winter annual, so it competes pretty well with cheatgrass. And I don't like cheatgrass. It is the number one cause of, it's the number one invasive species on rangelands that causes trillions of dollars. So it's the biggest invasive species that we spend money on and lose money on as a nation in agriculture. And we have just kind of started getting it in Sunriver. It's been in Bend and Redmond and stuff for years, but over the last like 10 years or so, it's really started to kind of pick up in town here. So that's where we get these species that root really deep. If you ever dig up any of these bunch grasses, I've pulled some out and their roots are like this. Yeah, it's crazy. And I go, and I take soil samples out here every year. There's nothing in this soil. Every year when I take a soil sample, there's no potassium, no potash, no nitrogen, nothing. What the heck they're finding, I have no idea. Even after I fertilize and do compost teas and anything like that out in the garden, I'll still take at the end of the year, I'll take a test. Nothing. They utilize every last thing that they can find and it gets back to nothing. Granted, there's a whole bunch of minerals and stuff out here from it being volcanic, but it's not giving you those essential nutrients that they need. So another reason why you plant natives is you don't have to put all that stuff on them. So these grasses alone, they just root super deep. And so we get to utilize them for a whole bunch of different things when it comes to slope stability. If you try to put in, or if you have wetlands like we have out here. And then we even have species like Great Basin rye. You'll see this on some of the roundabouts. It looks a lot like Karl Forster's, if you guys know what that is. It's that shrub that you see growing everywhere. I always say you can figure out when homes were built here based on their landscapes. Because everybody used a specific plant palette at, in 1985 to 1992 or something. But Karl Forster's went in the early aughts, and they're a grass that's about yay tall. They're really pretty, but they don't seed. They don't have any viable seeds or anything like that. So if you got one, you always have one. And they don't really root deep or anything like that. So I always try to find comparisons that are native, and the native species that's a comparison to that is Great Basin rye. And Great Basin rye roots super deep, and it can be inundated with water. So it can be underwater for lengthy periods of time. And so now you can put this on stream beds, and not only are you getting that water to start infiltrating down slowly into the ground, not quickly and running off and going where you don't want it to go, carrying soil away. You're now getting that bank stability as well. So I've used those from doing restoration work down in California all the way up into a couple of projects up in Washington. So that's the whole, West Coast that these plants are able to survive, and they have a really good purpose in the whole root. So, so yeah, and the other advantage of that is when you get those deep roots is we start to get that water into our system. We start to get that into our groundwater. And that's a big deal out here. We have some pretty big aquifers underneath us out here. And so it's really important to try to get that water back out here, back into the ground. So the other big reason for planting native is biodiversity. And you go, okay, well, why? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Biodiversity is super important to the strength of an ecosystem, right? If you plant one, we deal with this with bananas, right? This is the big one that we all hear about recently, where they plant one type of banana. And because they plant one type of banana, because it's easy, and because it's what people like, and it's because it's what sells, it's because you can pick it when it's lasts forever. But when one bug, one disease hits it, you're now wiping out entire crops. So when you have diversity, if one thing gets a pesticide or a pest on it, or a disease or something, like a good example out here is Western gall rust, right? So you see every single lodgepole out here for the most part with Western gall rust. Those are those little cankers that are in all the trees out here. It affects 2 and 3 needle pines. And so it affects most of the trees that are in this area. Now, if we had kept this area diverse and had Western white pines out here and firs and stuff that should and did exist out here prior to the logging, you now might lose some trees, but you're not going to lose them all. And you have aspen groves and stuff like that kind of intermix within there. They kind of act as natural barriers. And so the biodiversity is key to the success of an ecosystem, because it really helps maintain everything in the numbers that they're in without when you start to lose all those things, you start to lose all the fauna that's associated with it as well. So you actually get to keep all that stuff, a lot of those animals and stuff returning to the area. That makes sense. Sorry. So the next section of this, we kind of dive into how to install a native plant landscape. And so I always start with the tools that you can use to kind of figure out what you like and what you want to see in your yard. And so out here, I use iNaturalist. And so when I took over 6 years ago for the garden, there was name tags on everything out here. And I'm not a botanist. So my background's in restoration. So I know the plants that the nurseries that I work with give me, and I know pretty well. But I'm not out here with my microscope pulling out each grass, seeing how many nodes, or hairs are going out of each node. And that's not my cup of tea. And so what ended up happening is I just took pictures of everything that was in the garden in the nature center, and turns out some of the identifications were wrong, and I'm totally fine with that. Like, the cool part is that I was able to put these on an app, and I got hit up by some of one of the guys that told me about some Indian paintbrush out there. I looked him up to use his name as his login, and this guy is the world-renowned expert on paintbrush, Indian paintbrush. I go, okay, well, I trust what you wrote. And so it's pretty neat to be able to see that and be able to kind of correct what we had, because ultimately at the end of the day, I want to share correct information. I want everyone to learn, and our garden to be a learning experience for people, and for them to come away with the correct information. And that's not always going to be the case. There will sometimes be mistakes that are made. So if I can minimize that as best as possible, I'll use whatever resource I can. And so there's a couple mobile applications. If you haven't used iNaturalist or Seek, they're kind of interchangeable. They're very similar. They're the same company, just different ways of looking at it. They're really cool. I also use iNaturalist, and I'll get into this later. When I dig plants, you can type in what type of plant you're looking for, and kind of zoom out in a broader spectrum and find exactly what you're looking for. So if I really want to find this is a bad example because they're everywhere, but like manzanita, I can type in manzanita, and there will be a whole bunch of different places where people have seen them, and they report them onto the app in a very community scientist kind of fashion. And then as far as identification goes, Oregon Flora has created Oregon Flowers on the app web, or the what's it called, the platform where you buy apps on it. It's different for, yeah. So there's Oregon Flowers, and then there's another one, and Oregon Flowers costs a little bit of money, but it's very intricate. There's a lot of information on there, and that one I think is like $4.99 or something like that. It might have bumped up since I bought it, but that all goes through OSU, and so that one constantly gets updated. And then there's a free one, unless they started charging recently, called Oregon Wildflower, and there's over 4,212 plants when I looked it up the other day. That's a lot of plant species. Granted, a lot of them are going to be on your side of the Cascades over there, and so it works everywhere. But it's really cool, and you can look up a plant and you'll see, it's got 5 petals. If it's blooming or something, it's got 5 petals. They're pink, and it's got whatever you see, you type that into the app, and it'll start giving you a list of what it could be. And usually by the time, if you're pretty good about it, by the time you type it in, there's like 5 things. Well, that's pretty cool. And so you can kind of identify what things are and what grows in your yard and whatnot, and what grows in the wild that you want to bring in. And then one of the other apps that I use is actually an app for hunting, but it provides property lines. So again, I'll get into the little digging part later, but being able to see property lines and being able to see wildfire layers is really nice, because a lot of species won't be there after a burn, and a lot of Oregon has burned recently. So you don't want to go there. You don't want to go check stuff out like that. But also, a lot of plants start to come in at sizes that you can dig them after about 3 to 6 years. So when I was digging plants for nurseries, that was a huge part of what I did. Is I go in the app, and see, okay, make sure I'm not on someone's property, and then make sure, I'm not in any wildlife zones or anything, anywhere that's protected. And then find plants that were the perfect size just by, spending 10 minutes on the app. It also allows you to
do that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Onyx is yeah. Yep. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah. So I'll cover it now. Shoot, it's part of this. So you can. I can talk fast. So yeah, that's fine. I work for the Nature Center here. Yep. So I'm the manager of horticulture and facilities, and Project Ponderosa. So I've been doing this for about 20 years or so now, and this is my jam. Anytime, yeah. As long, yeah. You can always email me. It's walker@snco.org. Yep, WALKER at SNCO, Sally Nancy Cat Orange.org. I know I'm mobile, so I just, SNC. My first name's David. No one calls me David though. Everyone's called me Walker.
Walker.
My mom calls me Walker, so it's just kind of stuck. I don't know. Yeah. It's always kind of weird to introduce myself. But yeah, so yeah, you can dig in the forest. You go up to Fort Rock, the station up there, and off of Deschutes Market Road, and you go in, you ask for a permit. They have free permits that'll get you 20 plants. They'll give you a pamphlet that shows you exactly what you can dig, where you can dig. Make sure you're not on private property, anything like that, or in areas that they're doing like spotted owl surveys and stuff like that. And then you can get 20 for free, and then you can get up to $250 worth of plants for residential. So as far as the landscape goes, if you're trying to landscape your yard, $250 is not much. That's just a handful of plants if you go to a nursery. The Fort Rock Station, the U.S. Forest Service office that's off of Deschutes Market Road. Yeah, if you in Bend, yeah. Unfortunately, there's nothing down here. There's not even substations down here. But yeah, that's their big office up there by Pine Nursery National Forest, Deschutes National Forest. And so that permit will allow you to dig anywhere national forest. Now you cross, Hoodoo, going back, you cross Santiam going back, and you start digging into the Willamette, and you might get yourself a ticket. That being said, I've never seen anyone. Well, I've gotten pulled over once, and I had all my stuff with me, so I felt good. But yeah, some of the other resources, Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center has that. There's nothing even to put after this. They got the best thing online. They got every plant known to mankind on their database. It's awesome. And then community science projects are a great way of learning more about what's out there. So when it comes to installing native plant landscapes, I always start this off with breathe. Most people are a little bit overwhelmed with the idea of getting rid of their traditional, even if they fully support the whole native thing and they want to go native, and their wife gets mad and says, you got to get rid of the lawn. The first, you just got to breathe. It's going to be okay. You're going to get through it. It's all good. Your neighbors might hate you for a little bit, but they'll come around. So you always want to observe your site. You want to see where the sun's coming, what your house has done to the sun. I've planted a lot of plants in areas that when I went out on site, it looked great, but that 4 o'clock shadow hits them, and now they got powdery mildew, and you just wasted $13 on a plant that all you had to do is move it 6 feet, and that was just not paying enough attention throughout the day. So sun, shade, water are all super important, and kind of observing those throughout the seasons as well, because obviously the sun is going to get lower and higher and stuff. So you always want to identify the existing native plants on your property as well. Go out there with the apps, check them out. You might be doing work that you don't need to do. You go out there and say, hey, all these are native. I don't need to do anything. I had no idea. Maybe I even bought them from, Portland Nursery sells a whole bunch of native species. You might have bought them at a sale. Moonfire Sun in town sells a whole bunch of cultivars, but they also have a little patch of native. So you might have bought stuff on accident and been watering it these years and making it big and strong. And then check your soil type. You can do this in a couple apps as well. There's Soil Web that you can use, and just see what you got going on out there. There's a lot of different types of soil out here. Even though the top of a lot of the soils is pumice, there's still a lot of different things that are in the soil. And especially you go up into Bend, you take a shovel, it goes dink about that far down. You can dig as much as you want out here. You're just going to start hitting impermeable layers of ash. I always recommend to take photos of your house, walk around it as you're trying to install stuff. Give it, especially if you have some time over the course of a year, and you walk around and take photos, and you kind of compare those photos, and you'll get a good idea of where to put stuff. And then plan your design. Choose plants that are native to your region, your specific site conditions. You want to include a mix of grasses, perennials, and shrubs. This is very traditional landscape architecture stuff, right? You want to have stuff that has different heights, different bloom periods, right? Because a lot of stuff in the high deserts all going to bloom at the same time in the middle of summer, right? So now you got everything blooming in July, and what do you got the rest of the year? So you can definitely combat that. There are still a lot of natives that'll start blooming late in the fall, and stuff that blooms early. Like we're starting to get all of our camas is starting to push up in the garden right now. All of our marsh marigolds are starting to push up. So you can get some stuff that's going to bloom pretty early. Manzanita will bloom pretty early. Yeah, it'll have those little pink.
Right out here.
Yeah, yep. And then but luckily they stay green all year round. That's one of the people's favorites out here, just because they are evergreens. But yeah, they do get their little blooms pretty early on. Manzanitas, you got to dig them. That is the one species that I dug more for nurseries than anything else was manzanitas. Yeah, and there's a trick, and this goes into just because you're short on time, so I'll say there's products out there that are called I use rue pots, but they're biodegradable pots. And so when you do dig stuff in the forest, a lot of the issue that you run into is moving that root ball multiple times, especially out here if you're doing it on this side of the Cascades. And I would wager that Willamette National Forest also has digging permits, because that's super lush and stuff out there. So there'd be no reason that you can't remove stuff that there's a lot of out there.
I'm just at my house here.
Yeah, so you can definitely dig out here, but because it's so pumicy, and you want to dig in spring and fall when there's the most moisture in it. But a lot of times when you pull stuff up, all that pumice will just go. And so what I use is these things called root pots, and they're biodegradable pots. And so I sit them as close as I can to them, get some natural soil in the pot with them. That top soil is great. The stuff top 2 inches is where all the activity is, the microbes and everything, the mycorrhizae, all that stuff is in that top 2 inches. So I get that at the bottom so it can start mixing in with everything. And then I just immediately, it comes out of the ground and goes right in, and I kind of hold the whole thing together with my hands. It goes right into the pot. And you always want to go small. If you see a tree out there and you're like, oh, I'm going to get the, it's going to be, yeah, no, it's going to die.
Where do you obtain those pots?
You can find them online. Roo pots, ROO. You can, if you want to hit me up at some point, I got a whole bunch here that I can share as well. But the reason I do that is because they are biodegradable. I don't have to move that root ball multiple times.
Yeah.
Where if I put them in a nursery pot, I then have to figure out how the heck to get it out of that nursery pot, and that's harder than getting it out of the ground. And so a lot of times what people will do is they'll cut slits in the nursery pot and they'll just plant the whole thing in the ground. That's dumb. I don't want plastic and stuff. And so I oftentimes will do the same thing with the root pots, even though they're biodegradable. We live in the high desert, so nothing really biodegrades in a timely manner. So, you get a bunch of compost around it and stuff as you're planting it, and it will eventually break down. But if you cut slits in it, you're still not disturbing the root ball, and you're giving it a chance to branch out and everything. But that's been my best route of getting things from A to B and not killing things and not J rooting them and stuff like that. So I highly recommend those. And that's yeah. So if you're gonna dig, that's the way to do it.
I did this about. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
I did this about a year and a half ago. Yeah, transplanted 6 ponderosa seed.
Yeah.
Guys,
yep.
like 4 of them died.
Yeah.
But I think they were too big.
That's a lot of times what it'll be. Once they get, I'll dig something that's about this big, and
18.
You should be fine doing that. Just go wider than you think. Yeah. So what you can do for that is, again, spring and fall, do it as close to the snow melt as possible. Like right now is a good time. But if you can't do it right now, what you do is you just take a 5-gallon bucket of water and pour it all over it, and then do it again the next day.
Okay.
Yep. And then it'll kind of help everything clump together, and then dig it. And the other thing you can do is dig. So if they got a lot of roots coming out, you can dig the roots now. Like you can cut through and dig around them now and not move it if you're not ready to move them yet. But that'll inhibit all the roots from kind of growing. And so you'll just kind of stop their growth right there. And then you can come back and keep doing in the fall when it rains a little bit more and stuff. Then you can come and just pick it up real easy, and it's kind of meshed all together. That's been my best tip.
Is May
Getting there. You should be fine. You should be fine. Right now, the closest you can get to when the ground has thawed and not gotten to that point where we've had too many 60-70 degree days.
Yeah.
So like this is the perfect time. And if you wait a little bit longer, you should be fine. May should be fine. It just really depends on the years. Sometimes May is brutally hot, and sometimes May is very Portland-esque, which hopefully we get the Portland-esque year. Get some water out here. Yes.
Rain between.
I hope so. It's Central Oregon, it's a gamble. There's no 2 years that are the same. Throw the farmer's almanac out when you get to Central Oregon. It's not worth anything. Yeah, I don't know. I hope so. Like I said, we've had years where it's rained, pretty consistently all the way through July, and then the next year it'll be hot as can be in May. And man, no, coming from the plant world, there's no forgiveness. So yeah, as you start to install your lawn, removing weeds is going to be one of the harder things. And a lot of people think like, hey, I'm planting natives, there's going to be no more weeds, there's going to be no more work. Now you got to get rid of that seed bank, whatever's in there. It's still, cheatgrass seeds can live forever. They have found cheatgrass seeds that are still viable, 75 years old. They found cheatgrass seeds that are 2,500 feet up in the air that are still viable. Cheatgrass is really good at doing its thing, which is living. You got to get all that whole bank out of your soil, and every time you till it or mess it up, you're now kind of resurfacing some stuff that probably wasn't going to grow, but now it is. And so a good way to get rid of grass if you are going native, I've done this a bunch, is covering it with cardboard. Again, your neighbors aren't going to be super thrilled for the first part of it, but if you do cover it with compost or mulch, I try to do a blend of 50-50 compost and topsoil over it, and just straight up dig into it, and it works pretty well at kind of just turning into mush, especially over on the other side of the Cascades. Over here, it takes a little bit longer and a little bit more watering. I always recommend people still install irrigation, even though you're planting natives and they don't necessarily need it. You're going to, one, it adds to the property value, and two, it's going to get stuff established quicker, and it's going to be way less work on your part. What type of irrigation, that goes into a whole nother, I can do a whole presentation just on irrigation alone. That's not interesting to most people. But yeah, when you're removing invasive species, you really want to get rid of roots. That's a big thing out here. We have a lot of species like bull thistle, Canada thistle, Dalmatian toadflax, that if you don't get that whole root, it's not only not getting rid of the plant, it's also spreading. And so now you got more in the next few years. And so that's why SROA and stuff will come down on you. And if you see Dalmatian toadflax, you call them. You don't even try to get it out yourself. And then, like I said before, you really want to avoid tilling. I till out here occasionally when I'm doing overhead seeding, just to kind of create some ungulation in the soil, some little pockets for stuff to grow in. And it's worked pretty well. I got some seeding going on out here, but everything that's growing is in the valleys, not on the top part. So, but when you do till, the top 2 inches is really where all the action of soil is going on. And then the other thing out here is you want to bring in our compost out here from the compost site out in Sunriver off Cottonwood is great. Those guys stepped up their games a couple of years ago. They got this whole system now that they monitor all the time. They can give you the stats on what's in here. They can tell you, exactly how much of each nutrients is in their compost. And they got these big old, it's got a name, but they're just big old bags that cover it. So it's not just a big pile that's sitting out there that's getting hot and they're turning it and stuff like up at the Knott landfill. The one here is actually pretty sweet. We use a lot of their compost out at the nursery, and they deliver as well. So you can get them out to your house and just have them dump a big load as close as possible. You don't need a ton of topsoil, or you don't need a ton of compost when you're out here. Usually like an inch or two on the top is great. And I love top dressing it versus like putting it around things, because then when you come in and plant stuff, you're actually kind of mixing it in with everything. So it's getting down there towards the roots. If you put compost directly on roots all by itself, you'll end up burning the roots. Compost gets warm, it gets hot, it can catch on fire. That's not always the greatest thing to do. And also, a lot of the heavy nutrients will burn roots as well. So when you get it mixed in with the local soils, that's really when you start to see the benefits of it, and you start to see a lot more growth in your roots. So yeah, definitely top dress. It's not a bad idea to put it around your plants and stuff, but the best way is to put it on before you plant and dig the hole. Yeah, people always ask, oh, do I need to top dress? And the answer is yes, your soil is poor. It is not good. I can guarantee you that. And then planting at the right time, we kind of touched on this. Spring and fall are going to be your best times. Fall is by far the best time to plant anything. It's when when you're going to get your roots to really start to dig in and start to grow before the winter hits and they go dormant. Spring, a lot of times you'll have to water a whole bunch and to get them through the summer and stuff. So dig your hole twice as wide, and then I always dig about an inch or two lower out here. When you're on the other side of the Cascades, you always see the pictures of people planting, and you want the water to run off, and you want water to go here and there because they'll get oversaturated. Out here, we want it to be about an inch below surface. Grade is perfect. And that way it kind of pools there, and that's where everything kind of joins in. And then you want to water the hole 3/4 of the way and let it completely drain. The hardest place to get water to a plant is its roots. So the easiest time to do that's when you're planting. So that's the best time to do it.
Sorry, I have to go.
All good. And
Thanks
if you want, this next slide is probably the one that you might want. So if you want to touch base with me, I can get all this info to you. I'll be here. That's all through SROA. We have a sale coming up, but yeah, we have. Yeah, they do their own thing. They really marsh my mellow when I'm trying to sell ponderosa. But it's all good. Yeah, SROA on the same team. No, they're great. We fully support what they're doing. They hand out bare roots, so those guys are like 1 in 10, like, unless you're babying them.
Sure.
We buy bare roots, grow the bare roots, and then sell them so that their survivability rates are way higher. And we got various sizes and stuff. So yeah, for sure. Yep. Yeah. And I can get you all this information where to get cool stuff and stuff for your property. Yeah. Have a good one. Thanks for coming, Don. Cool. Yeah. So as far as sourcing goes, if you got a house or even renting or something, I've messed around with putting native plants in pots and stuff. And then when we finally bought after like a million years of renting, I was like, cool, I got like 15 plants. I drove by, there's a bunch of detours in town on the south side right now. And I drove by the house that I lived in when I first moved here. So this is like 12 years ago. And I just totally put a whole bunch of stuff. There's nothing in the front area of this apartment complex. And so I'm like, man, cool. We'll start putting stuff in. So it's pretty sweet. I drove by the other day. I'm like, I put that. Like they haven't done anything to it, but all the stuff that I had put in is big now. There's like giant choke cherry and big currants and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's me. So I don't know. Leo always quotes that saying, if you guys, the best time to plant a tree is like 20 years ago. The second best time is now. It's totally true. The older I get, the more I realize, I should have done this. Should have done this a while. Oh, it'd be so cool to have a big tree. There's no time better than the current present. Thank you.
Were you rogue planting?
I mean,
we just kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, it was like townhomes, and everyone owned. I asked. I mean, it was all good. We knew the owners and stuff, so it was like, hey, do you guys care? And they're like, no, as long as there's something out there. It was just dirt before, so yeah, so it's all kind of filled in now and looks good. Put a whole bunch of grasses out there. Grasses are the cheaters thing, right? Like you can put a whole bunch of, it's kind of what I did here. Had no budget, so I go, okay, I'll just put in a whole bunch of grasses. And so now we got a bunch of grasses. Grasses are easy to dig. I want to put something else in their place so it's not competing with them and stuff. Dig your grass and move it to another spot. So that's kind of been the way to kind of get the soil working and everything kind of going. And you can always move them, and they're easy to dig. But you can dig them in the middle of summer. It's almost better because they're dormant in the middle of summer. That's why they go brown. You dig them and you move them, and then come fall when they get a little rain. So that's cool. If you guys are interested in any of this stuff, there's all these sources I have all this readily available for anybody, especially the seed sources. I've been trying to do a lot more with the seeds. On the seed front because of how economical it is. It's so cheap to buy seeds, even when they're expensive. You're spending like $50 and potentially getting thousands of dollars worth of plants. So I've set up if you guys have seen in my office, I have like the little seed trays that holds 4 on the heat mat. And there's a whole learning curve to it because stuff out here does need to be stratified or scarified or something. So you get to do your research on what you're trying to grow and how much time you want to put into it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. That gives you options to get all sorts of really cool species. I mean, what I always tell people is go on your favorite hike, go up Green Lakes, go up, whatever, Todd Lake, whatever you want to go to. One of my favorites where I asked my wife to marry me is in the Ochocos. It's Lookout Mountain. It's one of the most ecologically diverse places in Oregon. You get everything blown in from the east, you get everything blown in from the west, and all kind of mixes there. And you get this really beautiful, like 6 months of blooms. It doesn't really matter what time you go there. Of course, I asked my wife to marry me in the winter time, so there's nothing blooming. So. But it's pretty cool. We did a little backcountry ski trip. But yeah, it's super awesome. And yeah, definitely recommend checking that out. Don't start at the bottom, start about halfway up. There's a parking lot up there. You don't have to park at the bottom. The bottom is just pine trees and stuff, which are beautiful.
Is it close?
Close?
Yeah.
Ochocos are like, I don't know, probably takes an hour and a half to get out there.
Oh, okay.
So it's not far. Those mountains are beautiful in general. It's totally different. Go check out Steen's Pillar. There's Prineville Reservoir, Ochoco Reservoir, all really cool. Good fishing out there. But yeah, Ochocos are a lot less. The Deschutes National Forest hosts a lot of people, a lot of events. You got to get permits for a lot of stuff. But go find your favorite trails, find your favorite stuff. Use the apps when you see something really cool, figure out what it is, and then try to grow it. Or if you can dig it here, dig it. Get your permit and dig it. So, and then these are just some of the ways to get involved. Y'all should hit up the Sunriver Nature Center. It's great. Project Ponderosa is super sweet.
Check it out.
I can't believe that there's people that work at the Sunriver Nature Center that haven't been out to Project Ponderosa.
Reason?
Yeah.
Is it reason? Is it now?
Is it now? It
It's
is.
always.
Oh.
It is.
It is.
Other organizations that I mean, I love the Deschutes Land Trust. I love what they're doing. I love the mission. I think it's super awesome buying up land, restoring it, and getting people involved and educated on it. It's super cool. I think every town should have a land trust. I've never come across a land trust and I'm like, oh, that's dumb. No, it's always pretty cool. And the Deschutes Land Trust does a really good job, I think, of kind of getting out and like being involved in the community and stuff. And the other one is the High Desert Native Plant Society. MPSO is always a great way to get involved with other like-minded people. They like to do a lot of hikes and stuff, like identification hikes. So if you're really curious and want to go really, really slow on a hike and identify everything, that's where you go. That is definitely, yeah, that's hiking with me. Ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's that? And then if you want to take classes and stuff, the Master Gardeners class is awesome. That's on growing in general, but they also offer a few classes, last I heard, on through their extensions program out there at the Deschutes County Fairgrounds, on native plant stuff. They have a little native plant thing that installed years ago that they still got running and stuff, a little exhibit area. It's pretty cool. And MPSO is Native Plant Society of Oregon. Conclusion, yeah, everything we went over, just I think it's important for people to understand why you're going native. That's why I share the history of landscaping and how it's kind of started on a fallacy and it's just kind of silly, but we've become so accustomed to it and it's engraved in our head. So people just need to understand that that we can and should get back to natives. It should be a little crazy. It shouldn't be perfectly manicured. You shouldn't spend all that time on your yard. Spend that time with your family. Get a hobby, you know. Yeah. Maybe get involved with the community science program where you count like all the bees that are coming into your yard and stuff that are native and send that back for some useful information. You know, not going to happen with a lawn. And I, like I said, I don't have a problem with people planting cultivars. There is aesthetic value to all of them. I do think there's very nice blends of landscapes and stuff. And I get that the process of getting people to go from A to Z is got a couple letters in between. So, you know, mix it up a little bit, give it a shot. You'd start utilizing some of the technology that's out there, start utilizing some of the native plants that work well in other, in your environment and your aesthetic, what appeals to you aesthetically, and dip the toes in the water, right? And then it's definitely, you know, as you go down the path, just have a step-by-step plan. You know, it's super helpful to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and have some goals and stuff that you can meet, some check boxes, some boxes that you can check off. And it's not help alleviate some of the anxiety of kind of doing something that society currently doesn't really always like. You got homeowners associations that give you big no-nos on it. And you also at the same time have homeowners associations like here that are like, yeah, you should plant native. Yeah, definitely what you should do. A lot of the HOAs in Bend are starting to come around and saying, no, it should be native. You guys should all do native. Stop with all the inputs. And then this really opens up the floor to you guys. If you guys have any questions, concerns. Is there?
Is volunteer information for Project Ponderosa on our website? Otherwise,
Yes.
do I just
Yes. We have a great volunteer coordinator here. Her name is Lily. You can get in touch with Lily. You can get in touch with me at any point in time. I can bring you out there. I can give you a tour. You can come out for our work days. Every Thursday is a work day out there. I know it doesn't always work with everyone's schedule because it's middle of the week, but if you do have a downtime or something, or if you can talk to your boss or something, be like, hey, can I go out for an hour or something? She might let you, I don't know. But even sometimes we fly birds out there and stuff. So I think that involves Kelly being back. Not sure, but yeah. But yeah, so so Project Ponderosa sits out at the compost site, and it's really neat. So it's so that area is Circle 8. There's no Circle 8 in Sunriver. And so what they did was they needed a place for their wastewater treatment to go. And it's not just the pond, it's also how you get rid of wastewater. You have to dump it somewhere. And so they purchased that area out there, and they traded where Circle 8 was going to go for that area. So what they used to do is they used to just water the woods. They would have like a sprinkler here, just watering all the ponderosas and lodgepole and just all day long. When they go out, they test the soil, make sure there's not too much nitrogen in it, blah, blah, blah. really dumb. A lot of cities still do this. I went out to deliver plants to sisters last year. Sure enough, there's a out there watering all the trees. So what they did is they put in these center pivots a couple years ago, like, you know, the big watering systems for hay and stuff like that. So they have two of those out there. They have a half pivot and a center pivot, and they water all this hay. They cut it 3 times, 3 times a year, and they donate it. They don't sell it or anything like that, and they donate it to a lot of the charities in town. A lot of the places like Healing Reins that do horse rescue and stuff like that. So really, because before they're just watering nothing. So why not, you know, at least have this awesome mission and stuff. And then we hopped on there too. And the really cool part about that is that water, that treated water, can't really be used for a whole bunch of things. But what it does have in it is potassium, nitrogen, and potash. So where we would be spending money on our fertilizers, because when you grow stuff in containers, it's not tapping in. You don't have roots that are tapping into all the nutrients all over. They don't have like a fungi connection or anything in their roots to bring stuff in and share and trade stuff. So you have to fertilize. But we don't have to fertilize because of that. So we don't drink the water. That's a big no-no. And it can smell pretty bad sometimes when we're putting it down, but it's safe. It's not gonna, you know, get on your skin or something. It's not gonna burn you or kill you or anything. And we get the perks of that. So it's a really cool connection that we have with those guys out there, and they love having us out there. We love having them, and works out pretty well. Yeah. Yeah, you're always more than welcome to come out. It's gorgeous. I mean, those fields are out there. When the elk aren't here, they're there. This herd should split sometime soon. I'm surprised they haven't already. And when they do, one half usually ends up there. It's big. It's got like 100 head in there right now. So, yeah, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.
Oh, awesome.